Hi everybody, this is Chris Johnson here again. This is going to be episode 2 of the book review of this book here called A Return to Common Sense, Reawakening Liberty in the Inhabitants of America by Thomas Mullen. Now before I begin, I got a few things I need to say. Number one, the website is still down. I had somebody asking me about that the other day. There's a person that has donated the website to me, like the space and the server and all that, and he's switching servers over and moving my website with it. I don't know if it's going to be up this week. I don't know if it'll be up next week. I have no idea when it's going to be back up, so I apologize. Everybody, the website is still creationliberty.org. I just don't know when it's going to be back up. So the second thing I need to say is I had a correction on the last video. I sometimes referred to him, as the author of this book, as Thomas Mullins, plural. It's not Mullins plural, it's Thomas Mullen. So I'll try to make that correction. If I accidentally say it, you'll have to forgive me. I've gotten used to it because I thought that was his name and I was wrong about that. A couple of quick things and then we'll get right into the book. I'm starting to see some commentaries on YouTube. I didn't think anybody would watch it. I didn't think I'd have, I've got subscribers already. I didn't think any of that was going to happen. I don't even really know much about YouTube. But it just started happening. The commentaries have just been hilarious and rather atrocious in some instances. You'll have to see that the majority, or often, actually every time, I've seen the atheists come on there, they always end up arguing for majority opinion, and they always argue from their own opinion. It's basically they say, well, I feel like this, or this is what I think about it. Well, something that's an absolute truth that concerns liberty cannot possibly come from just one person's opinion or how one person feels, because there's other people that feel differently. So to determine right and wrong, you have to have something outside of man, and that's covered in the Revealing Liberty article that I talked about in episode 1. And of course, the people that want to go and complain about that do not go and read the article that I told them to check out. They won't read it, and it's typically the atheists are the ones that will not read the material. I'm not saying all atheists are like that, but certainly the ones that I have dealt with, 99% of them have been like that. They don't want to read any material other than people that they agree with. So anybody who wants the truth, go read the Revealing Liberty article. And the comments, I have to say, were particularly interesting because they were trying to argue small details, but they never mentioned the major points I was making, and quoting where Thomas Mullen in here was, well, either he did not actually read the material, the books that he's quoting from, or he's purposely hiding the truth of them. For example, things where I wrote down that John Locke stated clearly in the same book, he quotes from the, Thomas Mullen quotes from the 2 treatises on government repeatedly in this book, but yet he excludes the part where John Locke wrote what the definition of the law of nature was, and that is God's will from the scriptures. I quoted that last time in episode 1. So where we left off last time was where we had just gone through showing where he was only selectively quoting from John Locke and really taking some of his works out of context, without actually keeping them with what John Locke had defined from the beginning. And second, the other thing we left off with was where he was trying to, Tom Mullins was arguing for majority opinion about the right to life. He says most civilized societies have laws against murder, therefore each individual has a right not to be killed. And arguing for majority opinion is logical fallacy. You can't argue for majority opinion and have any kind of logical merit for any of your arguments. So he continues on, so let's continue with this. He keeps talking about liberty or freedom and using them interchangeably. Again, I encourage people to go find, you can go into Break the Matrix, you can go into Campaign for Liberty, you can go onto the Ohio Freedom Alliance, and you'll find an article called Revealing Liberty, a Defining Line in the Sand. And that article is the one, you may be able to just type it into Google and find it if you just type in the title. But that one, that will explain more of what I'm talking about. I just don't have time to discuss it in this video. I will probably make a separate video series on that topic, and we'll discuss it in more detail. So look for that in the future. Now, he again goes to quote from something from John Locke here. He says, to understand the political power to understand political power right and derive it from its original, we must consider what state all men are naturally in, and that is a state of perfect freedom to order their actions and dispose of their possessions and persons as they think fit, within the bounds of the law of nature, without asking leave or depending upon the will of any other man. I have to say I agree fully with John Locke there. However, I don't agree with what Tom Mullins is going to reference that to. You see, because when John Locke says that they can dispose of their possessions and persons as they think fit within the bounds of the law of nature, we do have to ask, and Tom Mullins does that in a little bit, we do have to ask, what does he mean by the law of nature? Well, last time, and I'm going to read it again because I think this is so important, I'm going to have to read this again from John Locke, and that's because, the reason I say this is important is because Tom Mullen quotes from John Locke all the time, over and over, in every chapter. Well, not in every chapter, but most chapters he does. So, let's see here. I'm going to read this again. This is from the two treatises on government that he quotes, that Tom Mullen quotes from repeatedly. He said, John Locke said, "The law of nature stands as an eternal rule to all men." Okay, and the rules that they make for other men's actions must be conformable to the law of nature, i.e., to the will of God. He said, laws must be made according to the general laws of nature and without contradiction to any positive law of Scripture. Which, when he says Scripture, he's talking about this book right here, the Holy Bible. Otherwise, they are ill-made. Okay, well, that's what he's referring to. So people can dispose of their possessions and persons as they think fit within the bounds of the law of nature. That's what that is what John Locke is referring to. And he says, without asking the leave or depending upon the will of any other man. Okay, so it goes to the will of God, not the will of any other man. So Tom Mullins continues on the next page to say, well, what is the law of nature? Then he says, Locke goes on to tell us. Now this is where it gets really corrupt, and we need to spend a little time on this. He quotes Locke when Locke says, the state of nature has a law of nature to govern it, which obliges everyone, and reason, now this is a capital R reason, which is that law, teaches all mankind, and who will but consult it, that being all equal and independent, and no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. Okay? Now, this is what's interesting, because Tom Mullen, I'm still trying to get that right. Tom Mullen comes in here, and he also quotes from this, and he will quote reason with a capital R. Now, why is that so significant? Well, in the English language, there are only three reasons that you capitalize a word. Number one, if it's a proper noun, a person, place, or a thing. This reason that even John Locke referring to, it's obvious this is not a person, place, or a thing. So what is it exactly? Number two, the reason that you would capitalize it would be if it were the beginning of a sentence. This is not the beginning of a sentence. And the third reason was if it concerns deity. Well, the funny thing is, you'll notice that when Tom Mullins quotes capital R reason, and John Locke quotes capital R reason, they're talking about two different gods. And you'll find the difference in there. Read this yourself and read it carefully, and you'll find the difference between the two. When John Locke refers to capital R reason, and he says which is that law, and that law he's referring to in the quote is the state of nature has a law of nature to govern it. He stated what the law of nature was in the beginning. He said it is conformable to the law of nature, i.e. to the will of God. So when he quotes to reason, he's talking about the same thing that is talked about in the book of Isaiah, where it says, "Come, let us reason together, saith the Lord." Okay, he's referring to that reason. Okay, but if you're trying to reason without God, you're going to have all sorts of fallacy in your argumentation, and hopefully we can get more to that later. You have to apologize, my voice is going out a little bit. I did a Bible study earlier this morning, and I've been speaking a lot today, so I'm going to have to drink every now and again. Lemonade. Okay.